Welcome to the Get Sacred podcast. I'm your host, intuitive life coach Melissa Elysian, and I'm here to teach you how to create more money, more love, and more sacred success. If your inner goddess is ready to create a lusciously abundant and pleasure-filled life, you're in the right place. Hey, love. I want to have this very important conversation with you. But before we get started, I just want to speak to the fact that I know that there's so many different kinds of people listening to this podcast. There are women of color like myself listening. There are men listening. There are white women listening. There are Asian women listening. There are Black women listening. There are white men listening. There are Black men listening. There's such a beautiful wide array of people listening, and I'm so grateful for you, all of you. But I have to start this conversation just addressing the fact that I'm going to talk about something. I mean, you've seen the title. It's called Privilege Yourself. I'm going to talk about something, and I want to be clear that the language that I'm using in this conversation is really directed towards people of color. It doesn't mean to say that there aren't things that are not, that there aren't things in this podcast that are meant to empower everyone. There really are. So I want you to listen in no matter who you are. But what I don't want to happen is I don't want anyone who shouldn't be necessarily listening to this with an idea that it would be an appropriate thing for them to use the language privilege yourself, privilege myself, per se. I don't necessarily think that that's a good idea. And I want to say that first so that we're clear. But I also want you to know that there's something in here for you, even if you feel like you fall under the umbrella of people which is probably not a great idea to use that language. Really what the episode is really stepping into and allowing yourself, giving yourself permission to be in all the places that you should be, to do all the things that are available to you, to take opportunities that maybe a part of you is not sure that you're able to or qualified for, to go for it. So let me start there. So with this idea, I mean, coming from, my experience of being in the world in this beautiful body that I have, there are a lot of circumstances where, I don't have the upper hand. I'm not going to be the first picked. I'm not going to be the one who's first considered. Assumptions are going to be made about what I'm capable of, limiting ones. And that's been my experience of being alive in the world. And so in a lot of ways, it shaped my own thoughts about what rooms I get to be in and what I get to do and how I know whether I'm qualified for something or not, or whether I believe I can be in a space or if I'm worthy of being in this space. Those thoughts that I have about any of those things has been influenced and shaped by the fact that I live in a society that's always kind of finding ways to tell me no. That being the case, and considering the work that I do, I think it's so important, especially for women of color who sit pretty far at the bottom of the list as far as privilege goes, to really privilege themselves, to give themselves permission to be in all the places, to get what they're supposed to get, to make sure that they're getting all the things that have been promised, or to feel like you belong in a space because you're there, and not having to question that or feel the need to prove it to other people in a way that other people never have to do that. And the reason why I think this conversation is important for everyone, especially for women of color, especially for women, especially for men of color, is because that the way that we've been forced to live in the world and experience this kind of oppression and exploitation and kind of letting us not sit at the table has really shaped how we enter rooms and how we feel in certain rooms and how we feel about even applying for a job, or how we feel amongst our peers in any situation where we're going to be judged by what we're doing or how capable we are, etc. And so what I want to offer is this idea that you really do need to privilege yourself if you belong to any group that doesn't get first dibs at the table. You really have to give yourself the permissions that society won't necessarily give you. What I want you to do is, instead of getting frustrated when you don't get what you deserve or you're not getting what you're supposed to, what's been promised to you, I want you to speak up for yourself and say that you should have the things that you're supposed to have and you shouldn't be overlooked. I want you to take chances and allow yourself to feel and be worthy of opportunities that come to you and present themselves to you. So instead of thinking to yourself, I don't know if I'm qualified, I'm missing this one thing, or like I haven't been doing it long enough, I want you to reach. I want you to privilege yourself. I want you to take the chances that other people take all the time because of their privilege, right? Because they know they kind of have an upper hand. They don't need to necessarily fill all of the requirements, and because life has always treated them that way, they don't have this worry that they're not going to be enough in a certain situation. Because that's true, I think it's so important that you give yourself the permission and the ability and the practice of giving those things to yourself, for taking chances that maybe you're not ready for showing up, even if you're not perfect, for moving forward when you're not ready, because you're worth taking a chance. It's so funny because I know there's so many places that this comes up, and I think one I was thinking about and listening to maybe in an interview was just talking about how in film, we see so many movies in the States that are created by white men, and it's like they can suck. Like, they're allowed to suck. But like, if a person of color or a woman makes something, there's like no room for us to be flawed, for it to not be great. There's no room for us to be mediocre. If we're going to be in the room, if we're going to be making it happen, if we're going to be creating, we have to be the very best. We can't be mediocre, which is like ridiculous, because you need to have room to figure it out. You need to have room to try and fail. And so part of that is giving yourself the space to do that, to give yourself internally permission to show up and not be perfect. I know that's hard. I mean, it's really hard for me too, because when I'm one in no one, there's so many spaces where I'm the only person of color. It's really hard to be comfortable as the only person of color and not be on my A. It's just, I feel the pressure of people having negative expectations of me. And so, of course, I show up and I show out. On the other hand, I'm mindful. I need to give myself permission to be flawed like everybody else, to like suck at some shit and still be worthy to be around, like to be in the rooms, to making decisions, to making stuff happen, even if it's not perfect. And so in that regard, I'm privileging myself, right? If I apply for a job that I don't have all the qualifications for, or if I decide to participate in something that I have never done before and I don't necessarily have the skill sets for, I'm giving myself a chance to show up, and I'm privileging myself. And there's so many ways I think that for women of color, for white women experiencing and dealing with patriarchy, for men of color, there's so much room for us to privilege ourselves, right? Like to not get in the way of ourselves, and to not participate in our own oppression, right? To not participate in making ourselves small, not participate in other people making us small, for taking up all of the space that we can in our own right. Let it be a one-way push. Even if society as a whole is pushing you down, I don't want you to participate in that. You have to push the other direction. You need to be pushing in the direction of what's trying to keep you small, instead of just letting yourself be limited by it. Something that I really believe is that God qualifies us. Like, you can ask one of my sisters, Kim knows. I don't really think that when I read a job description, or when I see what's required at a college for admissions or whatever, I don't think that I kind of let go of the idea that it has to be what they ask. And in a way, that's me privileging myself. But that comes from me really believing that God qualifies us. Like, I don't think that when people ask for a certain amount of years of experience, or when they want you to have some level of education, I just don't buy it, because I know that life is always presenting opportunities to give us the qualifications we need for the things that we feel called to do all the time. All the time. Like, yes, maybe you need 10 years of experience and they want you to have that master's degree. Or maybe when you were in your 20s, you like dived into a real life experience that gave you all of the skills that you need for said whatever application. And then it makes what is on the paper irrelevant. And so I don't always buy it when I see that stuff. I just don't. I don't think that the things that we think qualify people are the real things that qualify people. And so I take the pressure off of myself of needing to fit the description. Because I know that life is always giving us opportunities to be and to become exactly what we're supposed to. And so when an opportunity presents itself, sometimes you have to jump into it to see, and to be able to look back and see how life has really given you skills from all sorts of random experiences and educations to be exactly where you are. Okay, with that, I just really want you to give yourself permission to be in all the spaces, to do all the things, to know that you don't need to have everything on the list to make you qualified to show up. And I'm talking to everyone. And, I'm cognizant of my listeners who are white. Like I said earlier, I don't want you to use the term privileging myself. I think it would be a big disregard to a bigger issue that's at play. For you, I want you to have an awareness of your own privileges. I want you to be mindful of the ways they show up and exploit other people. Even if for you they're unintentional, your awareness has to be intentional. But just being white doesn't mean that you're not being oppressed by a greater force like patriarchy. What a combo. That kind of does the same thing. That doesn't let women show up in the boardrooms. That doesn't necessarily give us permission to be behind a camera or to be the head of the company or to be a genius. That's one of my biggest grievances, that men can be called genius and that women tend not to be. Utterly bullshit. And so, I don't know. I hope you understand where I'm coming from. I hope you know that I just want you to live a life where, regardless if something else is trying to hold you back, it's not you. I just don't want it to be you. I want you to take all the chances. I want you to show up in all the places. I want you to give yourself permission to be there. I want you to give yourself permission to not be perfect when you're there. I want you to give yourself permission to be mediocre when you're trying to figure things out. And a lot of us, myself included, don't necessarily get that permission from other people. And so it's so important that we give it to ourselves. So I love you. Privilege yourself. Take up all the space. Show up in all the spaces. Do your thing. Fuck up flawlessly. Be yourself. Have God confidence. God confidence is knowing that, there's a bigger picture at hand. The whole universe is supporting you. And then know that God qualifies you. That your life, all of its tiny little pieces together, will make you ready, will give you gifts for all of the spaces and places and things you want to do. They have things for you. And you might not even know until you're in it what gifts, those experiences, life gave you. All right. Love you. Bye. Hey, if you want to create a sexy, sacred, and successful life, I want to invite you to work with me one-on-one for the next 6 months. What will happen in that time is you'll have the room and a sounding board for creating a clear picture of what you want to create for your life. And then I will help you with strategy and mindset, the beliefs, and also my intuitive guidance around what your next steps should be and how to bridge the gap between where you are now and where you want to be in a way that feels aligned and is sacred, period. So to do that, go to my website, melissaelysian.com, hit the work with me button, and then apply to work with me one-on-one. I look forward to hearing from you.